So just to introduce myself, some of you will know me and some of you obviously won't. My name is Mandarava, and I'm coming to you from Rivendell Retreat Centre, which is in the south of England in the UK. I've lived and worked at Rivendell for about 14 years. And yeah, I'm probably quite well known for my storytelling and rituals that I do here. So the story that I'm going to tell you this evening is an adaptation of The Brave Little Parrot. And sorry, I've just lost the gallery view, so I can't see you. That's better. Lost my audience. The story I'm going to tell you is based on a Jataka tale called The Brave Little Parrot. And I've told this story on quite a few retreats before. And because Rivendell is set in a very beautiful landscape, lots of greenery and trees and forest-like sort of landscape, to help people connect with this story in this setting, I've changed the animals to the local animals of the English countryside. So instead of a parrot, we have a little robin. And instead of an eagle, we have an owl. So that's a bit of a new take on the story. In the lockdown, I got very into the whole experience of the forest. I was furloughed from Rivendell, obviously, because we couldn't have retreats. And I now live a little way from the retreat centre. And me and Nagasidi, my partner, we would go off for our daily walks into the forest landscape. And it was springtime and everything was coming to life, and we had that amazing weather in the UK. It was almost like a sort of enchanted time. I know it wasn't like that everywhere, but there was something where I was at that time in a sort of bubble, and everything had quietened down in the countryside. There were no aeroplanes, the traffic had gone, and there were very few people actually where we were, where we go for our walks. So I started to really soak up this experience of the forest, and I'd come back to our home and I'd want to bring the forest back with me. So I literally did start to bring branches and of all shapes and sizes, much to Nagasidi's horror as our living room began to sort of change its look. And then I also started to, I wanted to paint the forest. So behind me on my scenery are some screens and a wardrobe. And I started to paint this, it was an imaginative forest. It wasn't literally the forest, but I started to get really absorbed in the forest. And then once I'd painted the forest, I went back to this story of the brave little robin. And I really immersed myself in this story, and I found it incredibly helpful during this pandemic, because I think it's a very interesting story in relation to, well, how do you respond to something that's quite frightening, something that's out of your control, some sort of catastrophic event? What do you do? What do we do as Buddhists when we come into relationship with something like that? And obviously nothing like that for me has ever happened in this sort of way. So I found myself being able to explore this story and these images and the animals and their qualities as I was playing with puppets, I actually had to really feel into the experience of these beings, these creatures, and what they were representing in the story. So it became a bit of a map for me, in a way, to follow, a bit of a framework. So yeah, that's just a bit of background to how I've come to do this. And I've always really enjoyed offering something on the convention. I've often brought something creative to the convention. And so to have an opportunity to do it online, it's obviously a bit of a challenge to do it on screen. I love to be live, so it's quite a different experience. And there'll be some things that will get missed in the telling of that, but hopefully something of this story will come across to you through your screens and from the Rivendell Shrine Room. And I'd like to start by setting it in the context of the Ratna Sutta. So the Ratna Sutta are verses of protection, verses where we're calling on the local deities, on the creatures of the earth and the spirits of the sky. We're calling on them for protection, both those animals and creatures that we know about, that inhabit our landscapes, and those that we don't know about, those forces, those archetypal forces, those spirits, those the transcendental. We're calling on them at this time for protection. We're befriending them. So I'd like us to start by I will recite a short verse of the Ratna Sutta, and then after I've done that, I will begin the telling of this Jataka tale, the brave little robin. So if you want to just take a moment just to settle into your seats wherever you are, just kind of come back to your bodies, just really get a sense of your body right now. You might even want to imaginatively connect with this idea of the forest, and maybe you could connect with having roots like a tree going down through your legs into the earth, and then the trunk of your body and branches reaching up. Just take a moment there. Maybe even becoming aware of the landscape that you're in, the landscape around you, the trees nearby. You might not be able to see them, but maybe you can sense them nearby. And maybe the creatures around that landscape that you live alongside, that you may not see right now, but they're there. Creatures of the night are beginning to emerge. So the Ratna Sutta. Whatever beings are assembled here, creatures of earth and spirits of sky, may you all be well and happy. Please listen to what we say at this time of need. Please send your metta day and night toward the human race, on whose behalf we make these offerings, on whose behalf I offer this story. Please give us your protection. We are your friends. And all you fleshly beings and spirits, gather round. Let us together salute the Buddha, salute the Dharma, Salute the Sangha. May there be peace. So the story of the brave little robin. Once, in the heart of a beautiful forest, where the sun met the moon, where bluebells in springtime sang their magic, and where the sunsets of summer glowed through the trees, where autumn leaves scattered their blessings, and where the silver moonlight shone through the shadows of winter. It was in the heart of this forest, where 3 tall trees stood over a river. Here there lived a little robin. The little robin loved this place. He loved living in the forest and had many friends. He loved to fly amongst the trees, hopping from branch to branch, flying through the leaves. And sometimes he'd eat berries on the trees or fruits in the summer. During the day, he would swoop down to the river and drink from its waters. And then up again, singing his heart out. He especially loved to sing in the morning time, when he would wake the whole forest. And this is when his friends would come to visit. First to come was the young doe. She could hear the robin's song from far away, and she'd come skipping in. How happy she was to hear the little robin. She'd be up on her hind legs, reaching her ears up, just to hear the beautiful notes. And she'd skip around and dance with joy at the wonderful tune the robin sang. But there were some times when the young doe would come and she would have had a frightening day, for she had been approached by bigger animals and she was shaken up. At these times, the little robin would sing sweetly to the doe and calm her nerves, until eventually she came back to life herself and back to her old self. And off she'd go into the forest for her day's adventures. Then there was the big-tailed fox. He was a lively character, and he'd been up all night, and he came to tell the little robin of all the things he'd been up to, and how he'd been in this fight and that fight, and all the different scrapes he got into, and he'd hide behind that tree, and then he'd leap out of that one, and then he'd run round, and he always got away. And he was so happy to tell the robin all his stories. And the little robin, he would just listen, and he'd laugh, and oh, and on the fox went, until eventually he'd said all there was to say. Then he too would go off, scamper off for his day in the forest. The last animal to get up in the morning was Old Badger. He was also a friend of the robin, and he struggled to get up. His back legs never worked, and he got stuck behind bushes, and he couldn't see very well, and he was moaning and groaning, usually most of the morning. And the little robin would listen patiently. He'd understand how the badger struggled, and he'd be kind to him. And the badger would go down to the river and get his drink of water. And once he was done, he too would go back to his den, sometimes getting a bit lost on his way, and the robin would direct him home. And so this is how the days began in the forest with the robin. Now it was the end of a long, hot summer. It was that time of year when the weather starts to change. And it was the end of a long, hot day. Well, suddenly, from nowhere, a wind came in from the north. And it blew the robin off the tree unexpectedly. It blew through the trees, and some of them lost their leaves before their time. Then came dark, heavy thunderclouds. Crashing thunder and lightning began to strike through the forest down to the earth. And before you knew it, one of the trees had caught a spark of fire, and the fire began to spread through the foliage. Well, the little robin, seeing the fire, flew high up amongst the trees and called out to the animals, "You must save yourself. You must go to the river. You must go to the river. You must come to the river," the little robin called out. Well, the young doe came skipping in, and when she saw the fire, immediately ran away, terrified, into the depths of the forest. The big-tailed fox saw the fire and tried to chase it and fight it with all his might, but even this fight he couldn't win, and so he ran off into the depths of the forest. Poor old Badge, he came up from his den, choking with the smoke, but saw the fire and immediately he went back down underground. And so the fire began to spread, and the wind picked up, and the flames grew bigger. And the flames went through the different parts of the forest. They expanded and travelled faster than you could imagine. Even into the depths of the forest, the flames began to catch, until eventually they settled by the 3 trees and the river, while the little robin flew up above the treetops and again called out to his friends, "You must go to the river. Please come back. You must go to the river." But he realised they would not get to the river, for the fire would now created a big wall, and it would no way could they get there. What could the little robin do? He flew around trying to think of what to do. And then an idea came. Quickly, he flew down to the river and dipped his wings, his whole body, deep in the waters, and then came up and went to the fire and flew above the fire, sprinkling water like jewels over the flames. Back down to the river the robin went, and up again, desperately trying to put out the flames with these few drops of water. He would not stop. He went back and forth, tirelessly trying all he could to put out the fire. But eventually, the robin grew exhausted and collapsed on one of the treetops to rest. Well up above the forest, above the sun and the moon, there dwelt the gods. Now, they didn't usually take much interest in the matters of the earth, but on this occasion, they happened to see this most unusual sight of the robin flying backwards and forwards, trying to put out a fire. And they found it most entertaining and laughed amongst themselves at this ridiculous sight. All but one of them. One of them was moved by this robin's effort and decided to come down and take a closer look. The god stepped into the moon as she was travelling through the night sky. And while she travelled, turned herself into a white, snowy white owl and flew out of the moon and sat amongst the treetops. And then the moon continued her journey into the night. The owl looked down at the little robin and saw he was exhausted. And she called to him, "Little one, you must go to the river. You must rest. You cannot save these animals. You must save yourself. There's no way you can put out this fire." Well, this woke up the little robin, and he flew towards the owl and said, "I don't need some advice from a wise old owl. I need your help." And with that, he went back on his mission to save the forest, flying backwards and forwards up amongst the flames, trying his best to put out the fire. But soon again was exhausted. His wings were charred and he could not breathe so well anymore. The owl kept calling to the robin, "You must save yourself. Please be sensible." But realised the robin was not listening. The owl could hear the gods up in the skies laughing. She did not want to return there, and looked at the robin and wondered what to do. And she flew around, and as she began to fly, tears fell from the owl's eyes. She was so moved by what she'd seen, and she flew through the whole forest. She flew through springtime and cried over the bluebells. She wept and wept over the forest, She wept over summer, her tears falling on the parched earth and the sunsets. And she wept over the depths of the forest. Big crystal tears fell from her eyes. She wept over autumn, and the leaves glistened with tears, falling through the skies of the night. More and more tears fell into winter, and the moonlight glistened over them. And then she came to where the 3 trees stood over the river, and she wept over this magical glade, tears falling over the branches, glistening in the moon. She wept and she wept. And she went to the little robin and wept over the robin. Big tears falling over the forest and all that lived there. And eventually the fires subsided, and the owl sat in the treetops, and the stars came out, and the robin came round. She could sing again. She could feel her wings. She saw that her feathers had their shine. And she called out and sang out to the animals, "The fire has gone! The fire has gone!" And the little animals all came back to the glade. The young doe came skipping in the minute she heard the robin's song. She leapt into the tree, so happy to hear the robin again. The big-tailed fox, he came rushing in to tell them all of his adventures in the forest and how he'd fought the fire. And then old Badge, he came up, desperate for a drink of water. Oh, what a relief! And how happy he was too to be with his friends. And they all sat through the night with the tears sparkling through the trees, until eventually the stars faded. And the early morning travelled into the day. The sun came. And they saw, as the sun was rising, that new shoots were appearing all throughout the forest. And the little robin flew into the sun. Oh, how happy he was, how happy he was. And all was well in the forest. And so ends the telling of the brave little robin.